The bridge of the Explorer-class vessel Stargazer hummed with a quiet efficiency, a symphony of blinking indicator lights and the low thrum of the warp core. Through the forward viewport, the inky blackness of space was beginning to be subtly brushed with hues of amethyst and gold, the telltale sign of approaching an unknown stellar system. In the command chair, Ship Commander Eva Rostova sat with an air of calm authority. Her dark hair was pulled back severely, highlighting sharp cheekbones and focused gray eyes that scanned the tactical displays. She was a leader who prized precision and adherence to protocol, a reputation earned through years of exemplary service. To her left, at the navigation console, sat Lead Navigator Kenji Tanaka. His fingers danced across the controls with practiced ease, his dark eyes intent on the sensor readings. Kenji was a master strategist and an unparalleled navigator, his intuition often a crucial asset. He and Eva were a formidable team, their professional synergy honed over years of working side by side. They were also deeply in love, a fact known to the crew, but one that remained a carefully guarded aspect of their lives on the bridge. A strict, unspoken code governed their interactions in front of their officers, a necessary barrier to prevent any perception of favoritism or compromised judgment. Yet, the very existence of this barrier often created a subtle undercurrent of tension. "Report," Eva stated, her voice crisp and commanding. "Approaching designated coordinates, Commander," Kenji replied, his tone professional. "Long-range scans are nominal, detecting unusual energy fluctuations approximately 5 light minutes ahead." "Unusual how, Navigator?" Eva pressed. "Inconsistent readings, Commander, almost scrambled, like trying to listen to multiple frequencies at once. It's not characteristic of standard stellar phenomena." As the Stargazer continued its approach, the sensor readings deteriorated rapidly. The vibrant hues outside the viewport seemed to distort slightly, as if the very fabric of space was wavering. "Commander," Lieutenant Anya Sharma, the ship's communications officer, reported, her brow furrowed in concern. "Long-range comms are down. We're not receiving any deep space signals, and our attempts to broadcast are getting no response." "Internal diagnostics?" Eva asked, her gaze unwavering. "All systems are green, Commander. It's localized." "A null field," Kenji murmured, his fingers flying across his console. "A region of space where the normal rules don't seem to apply. Sensor data is becoming increasingly unreliable." It was then, amidst the growing unease, that the carefully constructed wall between Eva and Kenji's professional and personal spheres began to show its first hairline crack. Eva ordered a slight course correction to avoid the densest part of the energy fluctuations. "Commander, with all due respect," Kenji said, his tone surprisingly sharp, "I'm not sure that's the optimal trajectory. It takes us closer to the gravitational pull of that binary system we detected earlier." A ripple of surprised glances went through the bridge crew. Kenji rarely questioned Eva's tactical decisions on the bridge, especially not so directly. "Navigator," Eva replied, her voice remaining level, though a flicker of something unreadable crossed her eyes. "My priority is to understand the nature of this null field, not to unnecessarily skirt potential gravitational hazards that are currently outside of our immediate flight path. Continue on the ordered course." Kenji hesitated for a fraction of a second, a tightness around his jaw. "Aye, Commander." The tension in the air thickened. A few moments later, as they entered the heart of the null field, the sensor displays became a chaotic mess of static and fragmented readings. "Commander," Kenji spoke again, his voice laced with an unusual urgency, "I strongly recommend we disengage and hold our position outside the anomaly. We don't know what we're flying into. This is an unacceptable risk for a first contact mission." This was a direct challenge, delivered in front of the entire senior staff. Eva turned her chair slightly to face him, her gaze steady. "Navigator, our orders are clear. Establish contact with the Glyptons. They are known to reside within this sector. This anomaly may be a naturally occurring phenomenon within their territory, something they are accustomed to navigating. Retreating now would not only delay our mission, but could be interpreted as a sign of weakness or indecision." "But Commander," Kenji persisted, his voice rising slightly, "we are operating with severely impaired sensors. We are effectively blind. Continuing under these conditions is reckless." The normally seamless flow of command on the bridge had fractured. The crew, accustomed to the unified front presented by their captain and lead navigator, exchanged uneasy glances. Whispers, hushed and uncertain, began to circulate about whether the close relationship between the two officers was finally clouding their judgment, specifically Kenji's uncharacteristic insubordination, or more worryingly, Eva's perceived stubbornness in the face of evident danger. Unseen by the human crew, several light-years away, within the shimmering crystalline structures of their orbital platforms, the Glyptons observed. Their tall, elegant forms, composed of interlocking geometric shapes that seemed to absorb and refract the distant starlight, remained still. Each Glypton stood nearly 3 meters tall, their bodies built of multifaceted silicon lattices that glowed with an internal light. The subtle shifts in their thoughts caused their crystalline structures to subtly reconfigure, creating mesmerizing patterns of light and shadow across their forms. They possessed no discernible facial features in the human sense. Instead, their faces were smooth, planar surfaces that served as conduits for their internal luminescence. This light was their primary mode of expressing core emotional states. As they witnessed the escalating friction on the Stargazer's bridge through their advanced, albeit indirect, observation methods, the null field interfered with direct visual and auditory signals, but subtle spatial distortions and energy signatures were still detectable. The calm blue light emanating from their planar faces began to deepen, shifting through shades of violet before settling on a wary crimson. A series of resonant frequencies, a sound like exquisitely tuned wind chimes, emanated from the Glypton command nexus. These frequencies, translated by the Stargazer's universal translator, which had managed to lock onto a faint, intermittent Glypton communication beacon just before full sensor blackout, formed a concise and unsettling message. It echoed across the bridge of the Stargazer, a cold pronouncement from an unknown race. Your command structure appears unstable. We will not engage with a fractured authority. The message hung in the air, heavy and accusatory, a stark judgment delivered before first words had even been properly exchanged. Eva Rostova sat back in her command chair, her expression unreadable. The null field had not only blinded their sensors and severed their communications, but had also, it seemed, exposed a vulnerability within her own command. A vulnerability that now threatened to derail their vital mission before it had even begun. The carefully maintained balance between her personal life and her professional duty had been disrupted, and the consequences were rippling through the Stargazer, leaving a residue of doubt and a chilling message from the very people they had hoped to meet. The crimson glow of the Glypton message lingered on the main view screen like a fresh wound. On the bridge of the Stargazer, the silence was heavy, broken only by the quiet hum of the ship's life support. Commander Eva Rostova had dismissed the bridge crew to their stations, leaving only her senior staff. Kenji stood stiffly by the navigation console, his face a hard mask of defiance, his eyes avoiding hers. The man she had shared her life with for 5 years was a stranger, separated from her by an invisible, insurmountable wall. The formal meeting took place in her ready room, a small Spartan office adjacent to the bridge. The cold, sterile light of the room felt appropriate for the conversation to come. Across her desk sat Security Chief Marcus Thorne, a man whose face seemed permanently carved into an expression of grim duty. "Commander," Thorne began, his voice low and devoid of emotion, "I have filed a formal report as per Regulation 4.7b by. Lead Navigator Tanaka has, on 2 separate occasions, directly contravened a standing order in a potential first contact scenario. His actions have destabilized Bridge Command, and as the Glyptons themselves have noted, presented a fractured authority. My official recommendation is that he be relieved of duty and confined to his quarters pending a full inquiry." Every word was a hammer blow. Protocol was clear. Thorne was right. Any other officer and the decision would have been instantaneous. But this was Kenji. Eva looked past Thorne for a moment at the man standing ramrod straight by the door. His eyes were cold, filled with a distrust she had never seen before. It wasn't anger or disappointment. It was a profound, chilling conviction that she was a threat. This was the crucible she had always known might come. The moment where her heart and her command were in direct opposition. To follow Thorne's recommendation was to follow the book. It would prove to the crew she could make the hard choice, that her relationship did not compromise her command. But it would also mean locking away the man she loved, validating the strange poison that had infected his mind and, in doing so, abandoning him to it. It felt like a betrayal deeper than any breach of protocol. She looked down at her desk, at the data slate showing Kenji's service record. Flawless. Dozens of commendations for bravery, for innovative tactical thinking, for unwavering loyalty. This man, the one who had once navigated them through a collapsing wormhole by sheer instinct, was not the same man standing in her ready room. "No," Eva said, the single word cutting through the tense silence. Thorne's eyebrows shot up. "Commander?" "I will not be relieving the navigator of his duties," she stated, rising from her chair. She began to pace, her mind racing, forging a new path. "Your assessment, Chief, is based on the assumption that the navigator's actions are his own. I do not believe they are." She turned to face her senior officers. "The null field, it doesn't just block sensors, it's wrong. It feels wrong." The Glipton message, Kenji's sudden change in behavior, it all began the moment we entered it. "I am reclassifying this anomaly. This is no longer a passive phenomenon to be observed, it is a potential hostile influence to be investigated. I am classifying it as a Class 3 hazardous environment." By invoking that classification, she seized control of the narrative. It gave her the authority to take actions that might otherwise seem reckless. It was a gamble, staking her career on an intuition. "I will be leading a small investigative team into the field myself," she announced. "Chief Thorne, you have the bridge. Maintain our current position. Do not, under any circumstances, follow us in." Her eyes met Kenji's one last time. For a fleeting second, she thought she saw a flicker of confusion, a tiny crack in the icy fortress of his paranoia. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by the same cold distrust. The shuttlecraft Magellan sliced through the disorienting energies of the null field. Inside, Eva sat at the helm, flanked by two trusted engineering specialists. The silence in the cockpit was different from the one on the bridge. This was the quiet of anticipation, of venturing into a true unknown. As they flew deeper, a new sensation began to bleed through the shuttle's hull. It wasn't a sound, but a feeling. A low, persistent hum of anxiety that vibrated at the edge of hearing. It was like the feeling of being watched by unseen eyes. "Commander, are you feeling that?" one of the engineers asked, rubbing his temples. "It's like static in my head." "I feel it," Eva confirmed, her knuckles white on the controls. "Stay focused." Then, their short-range sensors picked something up. A large metallic object, not of Glipton or human design, adrift in the roiling energy. As they drew closer, its shape became clear. It was a shipwreck. A vessel of unknown origin, its hull rent open, scarred by some catastrophic event. It was from this wreck that the psychic static seemed to be emanating, pulsing outwards in waves of dread. Eva landed the Magellan near a gaping hole in the alien ship's hull and led the small team inside. The interior was dark, filled with the scent of ozone and something else, something organic and alien. Emergency lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. The psychic pressure was immense here, a silent scream of terror that clawed at their minds. And then they saw them. Huddled in the wreckage of what might have been their own bridge were the survivors. They were the Cathar. Bipedal and insectoid, they stood frozen, their bodies testament to a strange and delicate beauty. Their hard, chitinous exoskeletons were the color of a deep indigo twilight, seeming to drink in the faint light. Each had 4 slender arms, 2 held close to their chests, 2 hanging at their sides, ending in long, 3-fingered hands that trembled ceaselessly. Their heads were starkly triangular, dominated by 2 enormous, multifaceted eyes that shimmered like black diamonds, reflecting the team's helmet lights in 1,000 tiny points of light. From the top of their heads, 2 feathery antennae, like delicate ferns, twitched and vibrated constantly, sensing the emotional state of everything around them. They had no mouths, no visible way of speaking, yet the feeling of raw, undiluted terror pouring from them was as loud as any shout. They weren't hostile. They were terrified. Eva lowered her energy rifle, her heart pounding with a sudden, dawning comprehension. She looked at the Cathar, at their twitching antennae, their wide, unblinking eyes. They were telepathic, highly telepathic. The crash had been so traumatic that they were now broadcasting their collective, unending panic and paranoia into the space around them, a psychic distress call that had no off switch. This was the null field. It wasn't an energy field. It was an emotional one. A chaotic storm of psychic static. And Kenji had flown straight into it. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow. The static hadn't created his distrust out of nothing. It had found the hairline cracks already present in his mind, the professional stress of being in a relationship with his commanding officer, his innate fear of losing her, his anxieties about command decisions, and it had latched onto them. It had amplified his everyday worries into unshakable paranoia, twisting his love and concern into suspicion and insubordination. He wasn't betraying her. His own mind had been weaponized against him. Her mission was no longer about diplomacy or protocol. It was about rescue. Returning to the Stargazer was like surfacing from a deep, dark ocean. The psychic pressure receded, leaving only a lingering headache and a grim certainty. She strode onto the bridge, her helmet under her arm, and faced her senior staff. "I have the answer," she said, her voice ringing with newfound conviction. "The anomaly is not a natural phenomenon, nor is it a weapon. It is the psychic echo of a shipwreck. There are survivors, a telepathic species I'm calling the Cathar. They're broadcasting a field of intense fear and paranoia. That field is what has been affecting the Navigator." She saw the looks on their faces, Chief Thorne's stoic disbelief, Lieutenant Sharma's confused pity. They weren't seeing a commander returning with a tactical solution. In their eyes, she was a woman in love, returning with a desperate, fantastical story to absolve the man she couldn't bear to punish. She had found the truth, but her greatest challenge still lay ahead, convincing a crew trained in logic and science to believe in a storm made of fear and to risk their ship on the word of a commander they suspected had finally let her heart overrule her head. The briefing room of the Stargazer felt smaller, the air thick with dissent. Eva stood before a holographic display showing the chaotic energy signature of the null field, but her attention was on the faces of her senior staff. They were masks of professional concern, but underneath she could see doubt and fear. "Retuning the primary deflector grids is not a solution, Commander. It's suicide," Chief Engineer Lin stated flatly. She was a woman who thought in schematics and energy yields, and her expression was one of profound skepticism. "The grids are designed to repel and dissipate energy, not to harmonize with an unknown, unstable psychic frequency. You're asking me to turn the ship's shield into a tuning fork. The feedback could cascade through our primary systems in seconds. At best, we'd be dead in the water. At worst, it could overload the warp core." Security Chief Thorne stepped forward, his arms crossed over his broad chest. "And for what, Commander? For a theory? For a psychic field that no instrument on this ship can quantify? Forgive me, but the crew sees a commander willing to risk this entire vessel for one officer, an officer with whom she has a personal relationship. They see a desperate gamble, not a sound tactical decision." The accusation hung in the air, sharp and painful because it mirrored the whispers in her own mind. Was this desperation? Was she trading the safety of her 200 crew members for the hope of saving one man? She met Thorne's gaze, her own unwavering. "Your concerns are noted, and they are valid," Eva said, her voice calm and firm, cutting through their arguments. "However, my decision is final. I have logged the classification of this phenomenon. The Cathar are a sentient species in distress. Lead Navigator Tanaka is a casualty of their uncontrolled broadcast. We will not abandon them." She turned to her command console, her fingers moving with swift precision. "I, Ship Commander Eva Rostova, am formally invoking Command Authority Epsilon 7. I take sole and absolute responsibility for this course of action and its consequences. Engineer Lin, you have your orders. Retune the grids." It was the ultimate assertion of power, an act that isolated her completely. The room fell silent. There were no more arguments to be made. Alone in the cockpit of the Magellan, Eva watched as the Stargazer began to transform. A low, resonant hum vibrated through her small shuttle as the ship's massive deflector grids, normally invisible, shimmered into view. They glowed with an eerie, unstable blue-white light, pulsing in time with the chaotic energy of the field. The channel was open. Taking a deep breath, she eased the shuttle forward into the storm. The moment she entered the channel, the assault began. It was not a physical force, but a mental one, a tidal wave of terror and accusation. The low hum of anxiety she'd felt before was now a deafening chorus of her own deepest fears. She heard Thorne's voice in her head accusing her of mutiny. She saw the faces of her bridge crew, their respect curdled into contempt. She's compromised. She'll get us all killed. Then came the most devastating vision. The cockpit of the Magellan dissolved away, replaced by the memory of her small apartment on Earth years ago. Kenji was there, his face not cold and paranoid, but etched with a deep personal pain. "You always do this, Eva," he whispered, his voice laced with a sorrow that felt more real than reality. "You always put the uniform first. You chose the command chair over me, over us." The psychic projection was brilliant in its cruelty, twisting their shared dream into a weapon against her. For a heartbeat, her resolve faltered. The shuttle's controls felt slick with sweat beneath her gloves. This was the heart of her fear, that her ambition and her love were fundamentally incompatible. No. She squeezed her eyes shut, pushing the vision away. She would not fight fear with logic. She would fight it with truth. She reached deep into her memory, past the anxieties and the professional codes, to the moment that vision had twisted. She found the real memory, the one that mattered. It was that same apartment, late at night, a bottle of wine between them. They had just received their joint posting to the Stargazer. "It won't be easy," she had said, tracing the rim of her glass. "We'll be under a microscope. Every decision, every look." "I know," Kenji had replied, taking her hand. His grip was warm, certain. "But the rule is simple. On the bridge, you're my commander. Everywhere else, you're my Eva. As long as we trust that, as long as we trust each other, nothing else matters. I trust you." She clung to that feeling, the pure, unadulterated warmth of his trust, the absolute certainty in his eyes. It was a feeling of perfect resonance, a quiet harmony that the chaotic noise of the Cathar's sphere could not touch. She let that feeling fill her, becoming her shield, her focus, her entire world. When she opened her eyes, the visions were gone. Through the viewport, she saw the wrecked Cathar ship, and docked precariously to its hull was another Stargazer shuttle. In the chaos of her departure, Kenji, drawn by the same psychic siren's call, had broken confinement and followed her. She found him near the Cathar's silent bridge, his face pale, his eyes wide with paranoia. He was holding a phase pistol, his hand trembling. "Stay back!" he yelled, the sound echoing unnaturally in the dead ship. "Your ambition got us here. You were willing to sacrifice everything, everyone, just to prove yourself. You'll destroy us all." His words were the hollow echoes of the psychic assault she had just endured. Arguing would be useless. It would only feed the paranoia. Instead, Eva did the one thing the fear could not comprehend. With deliberate movements, she reached down and deactivated her personal energy field. A faint shimmer around her body vanished, leaving her completely exposed. Then, she sent a command to the Magellan, and the shuttle's defensive shielding dropped. She was utterly, completely vulnerable. She took a step forward, meeting his wild gaze. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. She focused on the memory of that night, on the feeling of his hand in hers, and she projected it. She sent the raw, unguarded emotion of that moment, the feeling of absolute, unwavering trust, across the space between them. It struck the psychic static not as an attack, but as a perfect, clear note cutting through a storm of noise. The pure, honest emotion had no anger, no fear, no doubt for the Cathar's paranoia to latch onto. It was a counter-resonance of pure truth. For a moment, Kenji staggered, a look of intense confusion on his face. The cold paranoia in his eyes seemed to flicker, like a dying flame. The psychic static, starved of the fear it fed upon, receded like a tide. The silence it left behind was profound. "Eva?" he whispered, his voice cracking. The phase pistol clattered from his numb fingers. He looked at her, truly seeing her for the first time in days, and a wave of horrified understanding washed over him. On the bridge of the Stargazer, Lieutenant Sharma gasped. On the main view screen, the image of the Glipton observer platform, which had remained a baleful crimson, was changing. The red light softened, melting into a warm, brilliant gold that filled the bridge with its light. Then came their new message, the resonant chimes carrying a tone of newfound respect. We misunderstood. The bond within your command is not a fracture. It is a resonant frequency. We are ready to communicate. In the quiet of the derelict ship, Eva walked forward and took Kenji's hand. The barrier between commander and navigator, between lover and leader, had been tested by a force beyond their stars. And in the crucible of fear, it had not shattered. It had been forged into something stronger, a resonance of trust that now echoed out into the silent, waiting galaxy.